Most players think antes just make the pot a little bigger. They're wrong. Antes quietly change almost every decision you make before the flop, and a lot of the ones you make after it. They change how wide you should open, how often you should steal, and how wide the blinds should defend. And they change how the hand plays out once the flop hits. I'm James Urbanik with PokerStrategy.com, and by the end of this video, you'll know exactly how your opening ranges should shift when antes are in play and the biggest adjustments most players completely miss. Let's get into it. First, the theory, and this is important because once you understand why, the range adjustments make a lot more sense. When everyone has already put money in the pot before the action even starts, two big things happen at the same time. One, it becomes profitable to steal, and two, it becomes profitable for the blinds to defend. That's it. That's the core. And did you know if there were no blinds in poker, the only profitable hand to open would be pocket aces? That's why, with even more dead money in the middle, the pot odds for a steal get better. At the same time, the player in the big blind is getting a better price to continue. You also end up with a slightly lower stack to pot ratio, and multi-way pots become way more common because more people are getting the right price to call. The simple rule of thumb is this: the bigger the ante relative to the blinds, the more everything widens. A tiny ante changes things a little. A big ante changes things a lot. Now, the most important part of the video: how much wider should you open? We're going to look at three key positions: the button, the cutoff, and the hijack. These are where the biggest differences show up. Starting with the button. Without antes, a solid button opening range sits around 42 to 45%. With a normal ante structure, that jumps all the way to 52 to 58%. You're not just randomly adding hands. You're adding the hands that perform best when there's already money in the middle: suited gappers, more offsuit connectors, weaker suited aces, and some of the better offsuit broadways that were previously folds. The button is where the ante has the biggest impact because you have position on everyone and the dead money is there for the taking. Next up, the cutoff. No ante, we're opening 27 to 30%. With an ante, we're opening 36 to 42%. It's the same idea. You start adding more speculative suited hands and some of the stronger offsuit hands that just weren't profitable enough before. The hijack expands less dramatically, but it still moves. Without antes, we're opening 18 to 22%. With them, we're opening 25 to 30%. Earlier positions expand even less. The further you are from the button, the smaller the adjustments become. One more important note on sizing. A lot of strong players actually open slightly smaller when antes are in play, often to 2.2 to 2.5 instead of the usual 2.5 to 3x. Why? Because the pot is already bigger. You don't need to risk as much to put pressure on the blinds. Some people even add a limping strategy when antes are involved. Let's talk about the other side of the equation: stealing and defending. Because of the dead money, you should be opening the button and cutoff noticeably more often. That's the easy part that most people get. The harder part is what happens in the blinds. The big blind's defending range also needs to expand. You're getting a better price, so hands that were clear folds without antes become calls or even 3-bets with antes. The small blind has a slightly different dynamic. It's already in for the ante and has to act first post-flop, so the strategy shift is a bit more nuanced. Light 3-bets and squeezes generally become a little more profitable, but only if the players in front of you are opening too wide or folding to too much aggression. Here's the most common leak I see. Players correctly start stealing more, but then they don't defend wide enough from the blinds. Or the opposite. They defend wider, but they aren't opening wider themselves. You need to make both adjustments. If you only do one side, you're leaving money on the table. Once the flop hits, a few things change. First, the effective stack to pot ratio is lower. That means you get more polarized situations, more spots that turn into all-in or fold decisions, especially when the pot goes multi-way. Continuation betting also needs a second look. In multi-way pots, which like we said happen more often with antes, you can't just fire the same c-bet frequencies you use in heads-up pots. You have to be more selective. Position becomes even more valuable because there's already more money in the middle. Winning the pot without a showdown is worth more, and realizing equity is also worth more. And finally, people are generally more willing to get it in pre-flop when antes are in play. The dead money makes the math more attractive for both the aggressor and the caller. And the wider ranges also make for some more pre-flop collisions. Let's lock in the practical takeaways so you can actually use this at the table. 1. Widen your late position opens the most, especially the button and cutoff. 2. Defend wider from the big blind. 3. Consider opening slightly smaller. 4. Expect more multi-way pots and adjust your c-betting accordingly. 5. You have to open wider and defend wider. You can't do one or the other. If you only remember a few things, make it these. The late position widens the most, the big blind defends wider, the slightly smaller opens, and expect more multi-way pots. Antes don't just make the pot bigger, they change the incentives on every street. Once you start adjusting both your opening ranges and your defending ranges, you'll notice a difference pretty quickly, especially in games where the ante is meaningful. If you enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe, and comment on what other topics we should cover. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.